I live in Saline, and I'm the proud parent of 3 young adults and a grandma now. I have a grandbaby. It's a 1.5 years old. I am running for Congress because I think that the 7th Congressional District deserves a better voice, somebody that represents the district properly and somebody that understands the issues here in the district. I had the good fortune to raise my 3 kids in Saline schools. I moved to Michigan 30 years ago, and I'm very concerned about the direction, in particular in the 7th. We are very much missing representation that understands the issues, the economic issues that our communities and our people are struggling with, the importance of public education, and making sure that we have a path and we invest in the people to make sure we have good training opportunities for good paying jobs. The 7th is, as many of you may know, is 7 counties, not only Washtenaw County, but Monroe, Lenawee, Hillsdale, Branch, Jackson, and Eaton County. It's a big county, and outside of Washtenaw County, the challenges are very significant economically. So I'm very concerned about, and I have some experience doing that. I was locally elected. I started as a volunteer in the Saline community, raised my hand to help because we didn't have a community gathering place. And so I had the good fortune of working on a project called the Saline Rec Center. And so now it just celebrated its 26th anniversary. It's a great opportunity to bring community together and help people be healthy and build a strong community. So I did have the opportunity after I was on city council to run for mayor. I defeated the incumbent mayor, and again, I was running because I saw a lack of representation. We need somebody that is a listener and will represent the people in this district. So while I was mayor for 14 years, I had the opportunity to work with whoever wanted to work with us, meaning the city of Saline, to make the community and work with the people in the community to make our community a better place. So I worked with whoever our representative was. I have the support of both former Congressman Joe Schwartz, who I worked with, and also Mark Schauer. I did a lot of advocacy on community issues. So I really understand from an experiential level on what it takes to do good policy. And I also understand the issue around healthcare. That's a really important issue that I experienced being a single mom for many years and not having healthcare. And then finally, I had the good fortune to run for the State House. At the time, there was a big tax shift. Some of us saw that same tax shift last year with the federal government, but basically the state did a big tax shift back in 2012, where we did a big tax cut. This sounds business tax cut. Kind of the same thing happened at the federal level last year. Basically, big business tax cut and a shift to the burden on all of us as citizens, whether or not you're seniors or cutting the earned income tax credit. There was a lot of layers of damage to our citizens and basically our costs going up while business taxes go down. So I think our system is completely broken. We don't have representation. I ran in Lansing to make sure that we had the proper representation and defeated an incumbent Republican named Mark Wilmette. Some of you may remember that. And I had the good fortune to serve as a state rep here for two terms. And during that time, tried to do some things around campaign finance reform, clean water, women's reproductive health rights, making sure that we had infrastructure investment here in the district. So there was a lot of different things that I worked on. But one of the most important things was to try to get more Democrats elected because we were in the minority and we've been making terrible, terrible decisions at the state level, and our state's really been suffering for that. So I worked really hard on trying to make sure that we had more Democrats. That didn't happen. So in 2016, I ran for the seat that I'm running for again. So I have a lot of experience. I also have really strong name recognition, and I'm just very concerned about what's happening here in our country. We need to do something different here for our country. And this is a time when we all need to come together and make sure that we change what's happening in Washington and make sure that the people that are currently there are accountable for their lack of leadership and the damage they're doing to the most vulnerable people in our communities is mind-boggling. And I've spent a lot of time going door to door since 2015, talking to people not only in this county, but the 6 other counties. And we need a leadership that is the right kind of leadership that represents the voice of the people here. So I appreciate the time to have an opportunity to come and speak to you, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Unfortunately, for those that recognize my face, there are people here that don't know me. So you're going to hear a story again probably that you have heard already before. The reason I am running for Congress is it's very complicated. I was a lifelong independent until the end of 2016. And I went to see Bernie Sanders when he was running for Congress. My wife, my stepsons, and my daughter and I went to see him in Ipsy. And we stood outside and we were freezing for quite a bit of time out in the cold, over an hour. And the people were just super excited, and they were really motivated because they saw something different in this candidate running. He was an independent running as a Democrat. And we got into the arena in Ipsy, and the energy was palpable, and everybody was very excited. And then Senator Sanders went on to give his speech that I think was a very moving and very human speech. Everything that he talked about really got the crowd fired up. And there were things that you don't hear Democrats say, and there were things you don't hear Republicans say. The things that we're afraid to say as leaders, the things that we think are divisive and they're going to cost us an election. He didn't say things like this is red and this is blue and we're on this team, we need to root for this team no matter what. This is the person we're told to vote for and that's who we vote for. He hit on all of the very, very important issues related to social justice, income and wealth inequality, LGBTQ rights, those types of things. He hit on most of the things that most of us think about every day and how they impact us and how they impact most of us negatively and how those who are underprivileged are affected very seriously, almost to the point where they don't have a chance. And so we were standing there, we were cheering and we were getting excited and everything, and I was very moved, and he was imploring everybody there, if you don't think that you can run for office, look at the people who are in office, okay? I had no intentions of running at that time. None whatsoever. I'm a social worker and a veteran. I liked the service of the people that I was doing. I was working on a longitudinal study with substance abuse and violence at the VA in Ann Arbor. I couldn't run because of the Hatch Act, and nobody expected me to run. Nobody even wanted me to run. And then at the end of his speech, I wanted to take a picture of my daughter, who was 25, standing next to me. And I was like, hey, Natalie. And I hit her arm. I'm like, hey, hey, hey. And she turned and she looked at me. She had tears running down her face. And I said, what's up? And she said, well, this is what you were talking about. And I said, yeah, I told you there was going to be a revolution. I didn't quite expect it to happen while I was alive. But I did tell you that you were going to be the leader of this revolution. And she said, well, Dad, the thing is that everything that he's been saying is everything that you've been saying my entire life. Okay? Now, as a father, that moves you, but it didn't move me because she was saying I was a great person. It didn't move me because she was saying, oh, you're just like Bernie Sanders. You're a superstar like Bernie Sanders is a superstar. The way I took it was my daughter looked at me and she said, Dad, you're human. You're human. You get it. You've always gotten it. So then I went home and we organized people to get involved in the Democratic Party. And we found out very quickly that the Democratic Party is not the party of the people, of the working class. I'm sorry, it's not. Now, that doesn't mean it's you in the room or members of the party. I get that, okay? But there are leaders in the party in Lansing that prevented us from doing the things that they taught us how to do by their rules, okay? We wanted to play by the rules, and we wanted to gradually enter the party, and we wanted to help move the party. We wanted to bring all this talent and skill that we had, all of these young people that don't have the opportunity to look forward to a better future than their parents had. They're there knocking on the door, wanting to be members of the party and to bring their talent and their skills. And time after time, I saw them get shot down. I saw people cheating the system. That happened in the 7th Congressional District. It happened in a lot of other districts when we went to the convention in February, okay? And then we got threatened, verbally threatened, physically assaulted, verbally assaulted by members of this party. Because it seems like the party's mindset is that this is a game between the red team and the blue team. Ohio State versus Michigan, the Detroit Lions versus the Green Bay Packers. But guess what? That's not what this is about. I've been canvassing since I decided to run, and I've been meeting people all over the 7th District, and I know, I hear more times than anything, they hate the Democratic Party because they feel let down by the Democratic Party. And I grew up in a house that was the Democratic Party supporting. My parents voted Democrat all of the time, and the reason I was an independent is because I didn't see the Democratic Party delivering. So the group of grassroots activists that I got involved with said, Steve, my research partner got sick and I couldn't work at the VA anymore, and they said, you can run, please run. You're a social worker and a veteran, and you can win this, and you can represent the people of the 7th Congressional District. And I have been canvassing a lot, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this candidacy and this movement that is built by grassroots people can win the 7th much more handily than anything else they've ever seen in the 7th. Thank you very much.
Do you have specific plans or policies you endorse with the aim of increasing turnout or voter access, both in general and specifically in this sprawling, often rural district?
Well, specific plans to get voters out is, when I attended a training from the Democratic Party, it was run by a couple of consultants, and it was back when we first started the campaign. And what I was told is that you don't try to get new voters into the elections. It's easier to control the voters and know the voters and to go get the voters and get them to the polls if you keep it down to a certain number of voters who regularly vote. Don't try to engage people who don't vote. Don't try to engage people who are apathetic or have given up. Don't go after the lean Republican or independent voters. Go after the ones that you know vote regularly in primaries, okay? Well, I'm a social worker, and I worked a lot with families that I know are underserved and underprivileged, and a lot of them don't vote because they see no point in it. They see that they don't matter, and it doesn't matter at all. It doesn't count. No matter what they do, the people that are elected don't represent them. Everything that my team has been doing has been to reach all kinds of voters everywhere. We have multiple teams out doing different types of canvassing. We have people who are doing young Democrats who lean Democrat, vote Democrat, and are strong Democrat. We have people doing people that are leaning Republican or independent. We have some other things that we're doing that I'm not going to disclose because obviously that's a strategy that we feel is going to be very helpful to get us to tremendously increase the amount of voter turnout. One of the things that I'm going to be doing in future elections is I'm going to set the goal that we work to get voter turnout that is equal to 0.10% more voters than in the last highest turnout that we have ever had. And that we do everything we can to get people to feel that they have a place in the party, that they have a place in politics, that their communities matter, that their families matter. And we're going to work, this grassroots network that I'm involved with in Michigan is going to be doing that. We're going to try to do that for the primary, but we don't have enough resources to make that happen. I'm hoping that we can do something like that for November because I would really love to see 62.4% of the people show up in a congressional and midterm election. Thank you.
So, I think I mentioned I did run before, so I did do some of this work, but we're doing a little bit further deep down. I call it getting below the veneer of the Democrats, which is independents and Republicans, moderates. I am meeting with a lot of different kinds of groups that, because a majority of our district is independent. So just in case you didn't know that, they go either way. That's about 40%. And they will go for a Republican if they don't know the Democrat, so we need to get in front of them. And I've been doing that, and I've been getting a lot of support out in the community, so I've been going to different types of organizations that are not a typical Democratic place, because I think we need to get in front of people, actually alongside of people is a better way to put it, because what people want to see is somebody that understands where they're coming from, and so understands their community and their place and their perspective and their family and their relationship. So for me, what's really important and what we are doing differently is we have 100% commitment to making sure that we're out across the 7-county area and getting, like I said, below the veneer. The other thing that we are doing is we are making sure that we have, so we do talk to as many people as possible that are voters and non-voters. I want to make sure that people understand what's happening on our campaign, because they are our voices for what's happening around the rest of the district. So we want to make sure that people know about me, my background, our team, what we bring to the table. And so the other pieces that we will be doing other things like mail and TV ultimately, and making sure that because it is a rural district, we have to get beyond just going door to door, that there is a certain level of engagement, and we obviously, that's nothing new. We will obviously be getting the vote out as part of the GOTV program, but we need to go beyond that. So that's pretty much a very general outlook.
What is your view on transforming campaign financing? Is the current system broken beyond repair or in need of particular fixes?
So the first thing that I would do when I get to Congress is we're going to have the majority, so we're actually going to be able to do this, versus when I got to the State House, we were in the minority, and even though I introduced bills to fix campaign finance, they didn't get a hearing because they go in what I call the committee filing cabinet. When you introduce a bill and the majority doesn't want to hear it, gets referred to committee and it never sees the light of day. And that's really what happened at the state level. I introduced bills around campaign finance reform. We have a huge challenge with campaign finance. We need to make sure that we change how we do campaign finance reform, how we do campaign finance. We need to publicly finance. I've already been talking with Congressman Sarbanes, has a great program. Some of you may have heard him. He came to the county party fundraiser. I actually talked with him in October of 16. I think some of his ideas are really great about public financing. Additionally, we need to do more disclosure so that at a minimum, it should be very easy legislation to pass. Is disclosure legislation that anybody that contributes any money to help a candidate in any form, that gets disclosed. That would really help offset people spending dollars towards campaigns. And then I'd like to see us do legislation to roll back Citizens United. That's a huge problem for our country. I mean, personally, the first time I ran for mayor, I raised $5,000. And I never raised any more money than that until I was recruited to run for the state house as a Democrat. And I was told I had to raise over $150,000. And actually, there was a lot of money that went to help the incumbent, like a lot. So we actually had to have enough so that we could get our message out. And there was all this outside stuff going on. So it's really, really broken. And we do not have a voice right now that is heard. And people also, the really bad part is there's a lot of lies about the candidate. So like there was a lot of lies that were said about me. There's no accountability. So that financially disclosure, more transparency, and then finally, I want to make sure we do address redistricting and getting more people out to vote. Thank you.
So I got involved when I was working with all of these other grassroots groups. I got involved with a group out that started in California and I believe in Boston. And what it's called is American Promise. And what they're doing is they're organizing in all of the states to create the 28th Amendment to the Constitution to overturn Citizens United. It's really the only way that we're going to be able to do that. And I'm not sure if everyone in this room is aware of what Citizens United meant when it came to Michigan and they decided to put it on what they refer to as putting it on steroids, where you can donate any amount of money and it can be dark. You don't have to disclose who donated the money. I think it's really important that the people get behind the idea of the 28th Amendment because that's really what it's going to take. You may not have noticed or not, but both parties are very much entrenched with the amount of money that they raise and spend in campaigns. I'm telling you as a grassroots candidate, the amount that we can get done with the small dollar donations we get is tremendous because then you're forced to be creative, you're forced to use the talent that you have on hand. You're forced to work in a community with a lot of people where they bring everything that they have to the table to provide to the team to get the things done that need to be done. It's a very human thing, it's a very beautiful thing to be a part of because it doesn't have any of that corruption. We're not taking any money from corporate PACs, we're not taking any money from donors who are trying to get something in return. It makes it difficult, of course, but the more of us that get involved in the idea of the 28th Amendment and know that we need to learn how to do campaigning without taking that corporate money, the more power the people have in making the decisions that we make as politicians. We all know that that's what we need to do. You're going to have politicians, especially establishment Democrats and Republicans, tell you that there is no way to do this without all of that money. I don't know if you've looked at the amount of money that the candidates spent in the last congressional race in this district. It was astronomical, and over half of it was for media, to be on TV, to be creating those commercials. A lot of them are lies, and they don't really mean much, but that's what they do. Okay, but if you're out reaching out with the people and you're working with the people and you're setting this example that you're not going to be using corporate money to run your campaigns, it's a lot easier to get them to understand that you are really representing them. It's a lot easier to get them to vote and engage in this process. Remember, it's not just about winning the campaign, it's about giving control to the people so that we can govern ourselves the way that we want to be governed and not how the corporations want to govern us. Thank you.
What core message would you aim to run on in the general election? Where do you see Wahlberg as weakest or your message most resonant?
Well, I think the most important thing that we need to be doing is, again, engaging with people, all people in the district. I as a social worker, have no problem going into the neighborhoods that are run down and people are poor and there are a lot of drugs and violence and that kind of thing. I've been there, I did a lot of that, especially when I worked in San Antonio. And I think that the idea that we need to run on is that it involves everybody and that this is different. I had conversations today, I was in Jackson, in the poorest precincts in Jackson, canvassing, and I had conversations with people today that were telling me those things, like, I'm not voting, I don't vote, I don't care, it's not gonna ever, like I said earlier. And having the conversation with them and saying, no, I'm a different kind of candidate, okay? I understand what you're saying, I feel the same way. That's why I was an independent until the end of 2016. Okay, I'm not here saying, vote blue. It's all about blue. It doesn't matter, just vote blue and, the blue wave and all of that. That's not who I am. What I'm telling you is that it's imperative for you to get registered to vote, because this movement that I'm a part of, it's not me, the candidate running. This is a movement of thousands and thousands of people, millions of people around the country that are involved in this same movement that I'm involved in. And I tell them, listen, get registered, because we can't do this without you. And that's how you win the 7th. That's how you crush Wahlberg, okay? But what it takes is integrity. I don't go out there and play middle of the road moderate Democrat, because I know that there are a lot of conservatives in Jackson County or in the district down in Hillsdale and Branch and stuff like that. What I tell them is that what you see and read about me is me. Those are my thoughts, my beliefs. That's who I am as a person. It doesn't mean I'm right, and it doesn't mean I'm smarter than you. What it means is I want you to know that if you sit down to talk with me and you want to work on something with me, this is where I am, okay? And I want to know where you are. And that's how you beat Representative Wahlberg. That's what he can't do. He's incapable of doing that. He is beholden to these people that donate and control him. He will never be able to do that. And when you humanize this thing, when you make it about people and you make it about real life and the struggles that we're all going through, he's defeated easily. This is the key for the Democratic Party. Get rid of the corruption, get rid of the corporate control, and you will win every single election, because the majority of this country leans Democrat. Always, always Democrat.
So I think, my core message, who I am is, and I ran on this as mayor, is working together and meeting people in the communities that they're at. So at the end of the day, people want somebody that's going to show up and work for them. As far as the message in particular, affordable health care is the #1 message in my mind that people are most concerned about. A lot of folks may not remember, because Mr. Trump said a lot of other really, really horrible things, but one of the things he did say was bigger, better, cheaper health care. Does anybody remember that? So yeah, he made a lot of promises, he lied a lot, but that was one of the things he said, and people are like, well, what happened to that? Obviously, what happened last spring was totally the opposite direction. Healthcare costs are more expensive. I think that that is a fundamental economic issue. But I do think, from my experience going door to door and talking with people, they want to know that you're going to show up. They want to know that you're going to come back, that if you're going to DC, are you going to go and be like the person that's there right now? Mr. Wahlberg doesn't show up. He didn't, when I was mayor, the only time he ever came to my city hall was when he wanted to have a coffee because he was running for re-election 2 months before the election. That was back when he didn't have a significant opponent. Now he's having all these town halls, which is great. And you guys have, some of you have done a great job of pulling him out of doing just those phone robocalls. But he is very vulnerable he doesn't show up in the communities. He hasn't done anything. I think that we know that, and we can hold him accountable for that. But healthcare, infrastructure, you'll hear over and over and over again if you do go door to door for folks, roads, water, they want clean water and sewer, they want rural high-speed internet. A lot of the district doesn't have that, and that's equal access, not only for kids for equity and education, but home-based businesses or medical devices on the internet. And then additionally, people are desperate for the opportunity to get a good paying job, so skilled trades and supporting making sure that our folks that are in the district have an opportunity to go beyond high school, because so many people in the district used to get a good paying job with just a high school education. Thank you.
Considering the damage done to the environment and the perilous position our climate is in, should the U.S. aim to transition away from fossil fuels with speed and urgency, how best could we achieve this goal?
Well, I think there's the government policies of supporting and incenting renewable and green energy is really important. Also recognizing that there's a lot of job opportunities within that incenting renewable and green energy. Also, we have the 2 utilities in the 7th. DTE has a lot of physical plant in the district, and also so does Consumers. Their headquarters are in the district, so we have an opportunity to have a relationship with them and make sure that they are moving towards using more. They're saying that. We need to make sure we hold them accountable. When I was in Lansing, the renewable energy legislation was not to the level that I would have liked to see. They were doing some things with the net metering and solar. So basically making sure that we have a program that is an economic program, because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people in the district are looking for a job that pays decent wages, and we know that solar is now competitive, so there's a lot of opportunities to get solar. I actually did some work here in Washington County that we have with PACE, which is a program that incents commercial investment in solar panels, and so we could be doing that around the rest. It's a county, the county has to adopt the program, so we could be doing that in the rest of the 7. Wind, there's a lot of opportunity. Coldwater, the west side, Branch County, they're doing a wind farm there. So making sure that we make it an economically viable and competitive environment for clean energy and green energy. And I just say that, as a state rep, we tried to do work on clean water and making sure that we have the kind of that we need to protect our water, and especially some of you may be aware about the algae blooms in Lake Erie. That's a big problem in the district that we need to be addressing. And I did some legislation on trying to fix our septic code. We're the only state in the country that doesn't require septic code inspections. But the good news is I think they're going to pass that this fall. So thank you.
So I personally think that one of the biggest problems with the damage to the environment is that when you consider environmental effects of global warming and that type of thing, is that it really is a social justice issue. It's an environmental justice issue. Those who have the least to protect themselves from the damage that's being done are the most affected. We see it repeatedly and we see it all of the time. And we all know it doesn't take that long for you to think and then come up with the answer on how it is that we got here and why we're still here. I remember in the 70s being in elementary school in Metro Detroit, and we had everybody was being taught to conserve energy and that kind of thing. And we were, there was an oil embargo and they were rationing gasoline and that type of stuff. One of the things that it's pretty obvious that happens in our government all of the time is that it depends on what the corporations want. Come on, we know that's true, okay? The oil corporations, the fossil fuel corporations pay very little in tax. They get everything that they want, and when they don't, look what they can do to the government. They're very, very, very powerful. And unless we decide that we're going to do it, unless the people decide that we're going to do it, it's not going to happen, because they will always have that leverage over politicians. The only time that they will choose to make the move is when making that move means that they get elected. Because remember, that is the goal. We have to win this no matter what. It doesn't really matter who you are and what you stand for, we have to win this election. When the people push, then they start moving. What we need to be doing is we need to be saying, we have more than enough talent in the 7th Congressional District to take care of this problem. There are solutions in the 7th Congressional District stuck in somebody's brain somewhere who is suffering in a school that's not really functioning well, and he doesn't have the opportunities to go to college because of the cost of education, or she is sitting there in a science class thinking, it would be really cool if we could do this on a larger scale. It happens all the time. Anybody who listens or reads NPR or any of the, the publications where they talk about all of these programs for females in engineering and stuff like that, it happens all the time. These young people come up with great ideas all of the time. What we need to do is we need the leadership that says, no, we're done with the fossil fuel thing, set a very strict and very, aggressive timeline to get off fossil fuels and get to green energy, and engage this talent and this potential that we have inside the district and bring those jobs and all of that money to the district and lead the way, especially for Michigan, but not even, we could do the entire Great Lakes region. Thank you.
What do you see as the role of unions in the American workforce and in the Democratic Party? As union membership has steadily declined over previous decades and Congresses, are there ways, like card check, that you support to strengthen existing unions and increase union participation generally?
Okay, one of the biggest parts of the platform that I run on, and having received the endorsement of the Progressive Caucus and the Progressive Democrats of America, is we see in this grassroots movement that I'm a part of, that labor is supposed to be the leaders of the progressive movement. Now, I personally reached out to every labor union in this entire region, the whole part of southern Michigan, asking for time to talk to them about this movement and our plan on getting labor back to be the leaders of the progressive movement. Labor has been reduced to only worrying about the meals on their dinner tables because of the way that all of the negotiations with corporations have transpired. None of the labor unions called me back or contacted me. None of them agreed to talk to me because of the relationship that the union has with the party. I'm seen as an outsider, I'm seen as a disruptor, I'm not the person that they need to talk to. But I told them, I said, listen, I don't want to ask you for an endorsement. I don't want to ask you for money, the $5,000 check. What I want to do is I want to sit down and talk with you and explain to you how it is that we see labor as the leader of this movement that will save our country, and if they don't assume that role, we will suffer and we will lose our country. The ironworkers were the only union to speak to me. They were the only ones to invite me for a conversation. And the only reason that happened is because my cousin is the vice president of the ironworkers, okay? And when the ironworkers discuss if they're going to endorse or not endorse or whatever, they run into the same thing. Do we upset Ron Beaver, the chair of the Labor Caucus? Do we upset the leadership of the unions? The thing that the party doesn't get, it doesn't understand, is that the members of these unions, they are the driving force of getting more members into the union. When you silence their voice, when you do not let them have a say in who they endorse and who they can talk to, they're not stupid. They know that I'm here. They know you're not letting me talk to them. That doesn't make them think that the union is being proactively out there looking for solutions to the problems that they see. They see it as more of that corporate top-down type stuff that will never allow labor to get back to where it was. It's not going to happen. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I think unions are fundamental to the success of our democracy and for working families. Especially, there's a book out there, I can't remember, this something giant, and it's about service industry and how much opportunity there is to unionize so much of the service industry, because there's a lot of opportunity out there to unionize. And I know that, first of all, as a state rep, I had 100% support and voted 100% with labor. I strongly feel that labor has brought the quality of life that we share, whether or not we're part of a union or not, every day. So I think fundamentally it's incredibly important. And I actually had the bad fortune of witnessing what they did with the right to work legislation in December 2012, because it was right after I got elected. And it's a tragedy what's happening in this state, which is one of the reasons I've been working so hard on getting more Democrats elected, because we can't turn that back until we get a majority Democrats. And so I worked really hard in 12 to win. In 14, I tried to help get more Democrats elected. I was part of what's called a marginal. There's like 9 of us or 7 of us that had, we were gerrymandered to be Republican seats, and we flipped the seats. The other 2 women lost in 14, one by 50 votes, one by 100 votes. So instead of moving the right direction in 14, we went backwards. So that was actually one of the reasons I ran in 16, because the 7th has 9 state house races. And the majority of them now are Republican. They're even more so now than they were in 16. So that's really, really important. And fundamentally, we have to change who the majority is. And it's so important that we get the people out to vote. But I do think that, to your question, that labor is an incredibly important part and a partner for us to move us forward, to make sure that we get good paying jobs back in the state and that we build better coalitions. Thank you.
If you're elected to Congress, would you, as a member of Congress, support the right of Congress to be the one to declare war and not the president? Would you seek to revoke or end the authorization for the use of military force passed in 2002 that continues to operate as a blank check for an open-ended war on, in quotes, terror? Is there a better, more targeted, or democratic way to use our military? And all in 2 minutes, please.
Well, I think, as I mentioned in my opening, we're living in a really crazy time, and it's very clear that our country is at significant risk. And I appreciate Steve. I know he served, and he knows what this means to our country when you're putting our servicemen and women at risk every day. And our president has no clue what that commitment is. And my service actually my public service comes from being raised in a family that was career service through the military. So I wasn't raised in a political family. But I was raised that we give back to our country, and that's a requirement. But I'm very concerned about what's happening. I forgot the last part of the question.
Is there a better, more targeted or democratic way to use our military?
I actually think what we need to be doing is more diplomacy. My family, again, my family comes from public service. My mother's second cousin, who's a supporter, was ambassador, and I was actually talking with him a couple of weeks ago. He's a big supporter of my work, and he's in Florida, and he was like, how's it going? And so I started talking. He was actually with the State Department and an ambassador to a country, and he just said that, what we're destroying, I think diplomacy is the only way to go, that we cannot continue to build up arsenal. I will say that I do support having safe equipment, because my son, who's studying to be a fighter pilot, couldn't actually fly for a year because the oxygen in the cockpit wasn't, with their test planes, the oxygen wasn't coming through, and the flight instructors grounded the planes because nobody was listening when they finally said, fine, nobody's allowed to fly till these planes are fixed, and it took over a year. So we do have some challenges with efficiency, but I definitely think, personally, I'm a diplomacy first, military is the second option. I do have this national support of several organizations that support that, like Council for a Livable World and some other organizations, and I think that's where my nature is. That's what I was raised. My grandfather, even though he served in the military, was involved with the NATO Accord, also really believes in collaboration.
So I think everyone here knows why we have the ability to declare war the way that we do now. We know that the president has the right to, send off troops and manage situations and deal with situations that come up. But I think all of us who are really paying attention to what's going on around the world understand that it's gone well past what the intent of having that right was. And I think that we see right now around the world, it's not just our president, but it's the leaders around the world abusing this ability to bring war anywhere that their interests are being challenged. Again, if you stop and think about it, if you really consider what it is that the military is being used for, it's to take care of interests. And I don't know if all of you remember what Henry Kissinger said when he was talking about peace around the world. So we don't have friends, we don't have allies, we have interests, okay? The administration that we have now is really spelling that out to us. We use our military with impunity everywhere. If something comes up, we can go in and we can kill people. We're having the discussion now about actually having the right or the ability to kill Americans abroad. That kind of thing. What we do need to do is obviously diplomacy, but we also need to scale down our military. Our military is being used around the world when it has no purpose of protecting us. It's protecting corporations. It's protecting rich people. It's being used in a tit for tat. Hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. You go in there and you let us do this thing over here, we'll go over there and do that thing there. Don't ever forget when you're watching the news, okay? Like Gretchen had said, I served in the military. We have a lot of us have family members who've served in the military. Those young men and women that are serving in the military are who die. Those are the ones who pay the price. It's not the leaders who send them there, but it's also those other people in those other countries. And we can judge them, and we can look at them, and we can label them with other, the other, and we can make them the other. And when we think of a plane going in and dropping a bomb on a building and it kills 400 people, do you stop and think, well, that's 400 people? Or do you stop and think, well, that's 400 of that type of people? Do you not see the humanity of it? Just because we're Americans doesn't mean that if Americans use weaponry, that it means it's okay. And we need to really pull that in, and we do need to get to diplomacy. And it's going to take a lot, because the wealthy powers in the world right now are out of control. The oligarchs it's going crazy. Thank you.
One of the things that troubles me so much is the potential for losing the 2018 elections because of unresolved conflict among people who are opposed to Trump. It seems to me that as I listen to what you are particularly saying, that you are, Stephen, you are seeing a constant conflict among the people who need to work together to defeat Trump. And so that troubles me a lot, because I see Gretchen as a person who is able to understand and work with a fairly large Democratic contingent. And I see you as a person who kind of represents a half-separate wing of the Democratic Party. Now, this is dangerous.
Right. Your question needs to be a question to both of them. So your question is,
I'm fine.
Yes.
that's fine. Your question to both of them is,
how do we unite these two parts of the party? And I mean unite.
Well, I think the thing that gets lost, and I get this all the time, okay? The thing that I think gets lost, and it's a very fair point that you're making, there isn't unity, okay? There isn't in the party. There isn't unity. That doesn't have anything to do with me and the Bernie and the Hillary and all of that stuff. What it has to do with is that we joined as members, new members of the party, to help the party win elections so that we didn't have this again, okay? Since we have joined the party has not treated us fairly. So what you're really asking me to do is, what we want you to do, Steve, is we want you to be a member of the party, and we want you to bring your passion and your fire and your leadership, but when you're told to do what you're told to do, you just do it. Even if it means that you're being threatened, even if it means you're being abused, even if it means we're treating you poorly, you need to do what we tell you to do, because we need unity among all other things, okay? Now, that's not how I was raised. My mother and all of the females in my life raised me to stand for what was right at all costs. It is not up to me to save the party. It is not up to me to beat Tim Walberg if I lose the primary. You cannot expect me to represent a party who's not treating me fairly. And I'm going to tell you a story, and this is the truth. We wrote a story about something that happened at a committee meeting of the Michigan Democratic Party. The chair of the Labor Caucus, Ron Bieber, stood over a female member of that committee and yelled at her at the top of his lungs for 45 seconds, at least. We had witnesses write statements, 5 statements. We submitted them to the chair. And we said, hey, something needs to be done. We need some discipline here. This isn't right. They didn't do anything. Do you expect that young woman to represent the party with unity the way that you're asking for unity? Really? Do you expect me, someone who has a daughter her age, to think that that's the kind of behavior this party should display and expect unity? What I'm saying is it's not us. They're telling you it's us. We're the problem. We're the outsiders. The insiders. They get to decide everything. That's not what's going on here. You're asking me to sacrifice my integrity for the party. Why?
There are times that we have to agree to disagree about certain issues. We come from very different perspectives. I think we need to respect each other, and I'm really sorry to hear what Steve's talking about. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. I've been very focused on making sure that we do not have Mr. Walberg in office again. And the day after the election in 2016, that was a really long couple years, by the way. I worked really hard. I was running for Congress, and I was in the State House, and I was completely exhausted. But we had session the next day, 9 o'clock. So I go up to Lansing, and everybody, all the Republican men were like, we were really glad you protected straight party voting, because that's why we won, and they know it. Trump pulled in a bunch of people that had never come out to vote before. So, but I will tell you that I called Brandon Dillon on Thursday after we finished session, and I was pretty wiped out. But Mr. Walberg needs to go. And I told him that. And I told him I will do whatever it takes to make sure that he doesn't get elected. And whoever wins this primary, whether it's me or Steve, I will 100% be doing whatever I can. I will give my information, all the work that I've done, all my contacts, whatever we can do to get that man out of office. Because he is not a nice person. He is a hypocrite. He is a liar. He says he's a pastor and a family man. And he has yet to talk about those babies. He has yet to stand up for the people in our district and in our country. It's embarrassing. So I stand 100% behind the Democrat that gets elected in this primary. That's it. We have to win. We have to get him out of office. We have to get a majority in Congress. I've been fighting too long. Lansing is too broken. Washington is too broken for us to continue to be divisive.
Hi, Gretchen. Hi, Steve. I like both of you. And Steve, I believe everything you just said. And my question, it's really a follow-up to Fred's, and Gretchen, you just answered it. If Steve wins the primary, I'm wanting to know, Gretchen, are you willing to throw all your support to
I will
him?
do doors for him.
And Steve, if Gretchen wins the primary, are you willing to do the same? Because I didn't hear that. And I've got to say, there's one big reason, and that's, and I don't want you to sacrifice your integrity, but your integrity and our integrity is about getting Wahlberg out and Trump out. And then maybe the Democratic Party can start healing, because I don't think it's going to happen before the primary.
I will do whatever it takes to get that man out of office. And Steve, if you win the primary, I would do doors for you. And whatever, all my other information.
So I think it's important to understand this piece of it. I'm not going there, not because I'm not wanting Gretchen to beat Wahlberg, because I want Wahlberg in, or I'm a spoilsport, and if I don't win, then I don't care kind of thing. What I have to say is that even here in Western Washtenaw, even in the 7th Congressional District, when I have been campaigning, there have been things going on that aren't treating me fairly in this race for the primary. Okay, there are things happening with labor movement around this region that are not treating me fairly. Okay, when we say that we're going to be fair up to the point of the primary, then we're going to get behind that candidate, then you would expect that I'm being treated fairly now, and I'm not. I'm not being treated fairly here in Western Washtenaw. I'm not being treated fairly in the 7th Congressional District, but it's okay. If I get into specifics, then we have to do that back and forth, which takes a lot of time. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody that wants to know, okay?
But it doesn't matter, Steve.
No, it's fine.
It doesn't matter
Okay.
you're being treated fairly or unfairly for the good of the whole.
Let me finish my point, because my point is very simple. The thing you need to know is the one thing that I will not do is I will not tell a single person how to vote. My vote is my vote, and I vote the way I want to vote. I will never, ever, ever tell anyone how to vote. And if my supporters decide to get behind Gretchen and they say this is what we're going to do, then that's great, okay? If I'm treated fairly from this point up to the primary and all of the things that are going on behind the scenes stop, then I'm more than willing to say exactly what Gretchen said. I haven't seen it yet, and it's because people can pretend that it's not happening, because I haven't publicly said anything about it, because I don't want to sound like a little baby or a little spoilsport, a little crybaby about it or whatever. But it's important that you understand that. What are you asking this human being to do if I'm being treated unfairly? It is a question of integrity, and I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror the day after the primary if I lose and say, you know what? Hey, you gave it your best. That's it.
I'm a public school teacher, and since the Columbine shooting and everything that's happened since then, especially what happened in February, I was in Washington, D.C. as part of the March for Our Lives. Since February the 17th, when we back to school after the shooting in Parkland, I have to tell you that every day I walked into that school building, I thought, is today the day? And we got to the end of the school year, and I said, thank God we didn't have a shooting in my school building, my high school in Chelsea, my school district in Chelsea. Unfortunately, that energy, and hopefully it will come back, those students at Parkland and everything that they stand for and they've done, I think we'll see that start to happen again now that school's out this summer. But unfortunately, all the insane things that have happened because of our current president since then to kind of distract everyone back to that issue. My question is to both of you, what would you do as a member of Congress to combat gun violence in our country?
Well, my family was personally affected by gun violence. Okay, it's always been an issue that's very central to my life. And it happened when I was 10, and it's affected my family, every member of my family since then, including my daughter, because obviously she has to deal with me dealing with it. My wife is a school teacher. I worked in a high school before. I understand that anxiety. When we had the event at Dexter, the Dexter Library, I asked the students the question, what is it like every day? You know, tell us what it's like every day, to live in fear while you're in school trying to learn that somebody's going to come in with a gun and shoot people, okay? It's a very complex issue. This is what I said when I was down in Adrian at the courthouse for the forum that we had down there. It's a very complex issue that requires all of us to have the conversations about what it is that we want. I'm having an event in Lenawee that is this is central to it. It's how those issues are used to divide us, how those issues are politicized so that we can't get anything done. And what we need to do is we need to, as a community, say, this is what needs to be done. We bring in experts, we bring in anybody we need to. We know what legislation works. We see what's happening in Connecticut and stuff like that. We know what works in places. We need to be doing that, but we need to be doing, again, we need to be grassroots, bottom up, bring those solutions to them and tell them, this isn't optional. This is what needs to be done. Do this now, or you don't get reelected. You don't get into office. That's how we solve the problem. And it's a very scary thing. And I mean, I think that my stepson comes home and he's like, no shooting today, you know, or where was the shooting of the day, that kind of thing. How horrible is that we live that way? There's a lot that we can do. One of the things that because down in Adrian there are some NRA people that showed up at the forum and everything, is invite them to the table. They see us as people who just want to take their guns. We want to take all guns and put them away. That's not what we want. What we want is gun safety. And when we are able to meet as a community and sit down and talk, we can come up with solutions. But it does require all of us. If we fill up a room of politicians to solve the problem, we didn't get here by accident. Do you know what I mean? We didn't get here by accident. We got here because the politicians won't do it. And that's all there is to it.
So when I'm in Congress, I would do comprehensive background check. I mean, there's a layering of many pieces of legislation that, and a minimum comprehensive background checks, no fly, no buy. The whole buying on the internet, that should not be happening. I don't support concealed weapons. I know there's conversation about teachers should arm themselves, blah, blah, blah. I don't believe any concealed weapon should be in school. I do have a track record. I was one of the first mayors back when Bloomberg started his mayors against legal guns. You'll probably get some lit about it. Well, maybe not you guys, because you're not, but I know that there was a campaign against, saying that, I was anti-gun last cycle. So we're very much cognizant of that. I've been out in the communities. People say, well, how do you feel about Second Amendment? And I went through that when I was in the State House. We do have militia in the 52nd District. Some of you may be aware of that. They came to my coffees in Manchester. We've had some good conversations. So to what Steve said, basically, I asked him about what's the issue with assault weapons? Why do you need them? And he said, well, we just think that you're going to want to take everything away. So having these conversations and meeting people where they are, but there are some basic legislation that we should be doing. The majority of people, even the majority of NRA members, support comprehensive background checks. It's not rocket science. It's a pretty simple thing. Also, there has been legislation passed on using Center for Disease Control and doing dollar studies to make sure. I think that's important. My experience in policy is we do a lot of studies to make an excuse for not doing anything. So I wouldn't say, oh, let's have a study and then do comprehensive background checks. Let's do everything we can do in a bipartisan way to make sure that we do move, because there are moderates and Republicans that I think will support. And I do think when we get the majority in the House, we can do some really strong legislation. This district has been very much supported by the NRA and the incumbent, and we need to fight that and make sure that we get a Democrat in office so that we can fix our rules. And I know as an adult, your fear, I can't imagine. I mean, I've talked to other teachers where they say their kids are just really frightened. So thank you.
I'm very concerned about our environment, and I'm an environmental voter, and I've got lists from different organizations of who you should definitely vote for because they are pro-environment and keeping our country and our state safe. And so with all the threats to the lake and line 5 under Mackinac and the other corporations coming and pumping our water out and so forth. What can you do to protect the environment in Michigan and to swing our state so that we look like a progressive state? I mean, Iowa has more windmills than we do in Michigan. And I think that's hard to say out loud. And I'm from Iowa. I mean, I'm shocked. But, so what can you do once you get to Lansing?
Washington. Everyone in Washington.
Oh, gosh, well, okay, well, what will you do to support our state's efforts and get some more attention on our environmental issues?
I know Iowa has more because when I was mayor of Saline, I tried to get a gear company that makes gears for the wind turbines to invest and build a plant in Saline. And we were competing with Iowa and Texas. They ended up going to Mexico, but at any rate, there's other plants, and the facility is still expanded, and they've added other, but that particular book of business. But Iowa is very progressive. That was an economic issue. The governor in Iowa knows that is an economic issue and it creates jobs. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier, the Blue Green Alliance, which is a labor environmental organization. You should look into that. They really talk about the jobs around green energy. So because we need to get some of those moderate Republicans to see, oh, this isn't, and I learned this as mayor, this isn't just about climate change. Some people you have to say, oh, this is energy efficiency, this is saving money. We have to meet people where they are. So if they're like, oh, it's gonna make my costs go up, you can counter that. So I was really active. I grew up very much environmentally oriented. My dad was on a rivershed, involved with a rivershed. And when I moved so we were recycling when I was really little. They were also Depression era people, so that meant they recycled everything. But when I was first got on in Saline, I was part of the environmental commission that first started. And then we started a recycling program in Saline. And then when I went to, and so we did a lot with this environmental commission. But then when I went to Lansing, I did a lot of, around water, introduced a bill, like I mentioned, about the septic, trying to make sure we have septic inspections. Also, I did a moratorium on fracking. At the end of the day, a lot of these bills that I introduced that were environmentally oriented, they don't go anywhere because we don't have the majority. So that's where I am. I'm just in this space. How do we get the majority of Democrats in Lansing and in Washington, D.C., so that we can affect these policies around the environment? It's really important for the future. And you all know that Mr. Wahlberg says that God will take care of climate change, right? You guys have all heard that. If you haven't heard that, please repeat that to your pro-environment friends. I do have the support of the LCV, too. And Sierra.
Well, I think it's interesting to be having a conversation about the environment in a state like Michigan, right, with all the Great Lakes. It's just amazing to think that, like, that wouldn't be the number one thing that we were spending our money and resources on to try to save. It's really crazy, I think. I think one of the biggest things for a congressperson in DC to do is to not only maintain the funding, but get more funding and find ways to bring in more funding. One of the things I think that would be really great to do is to create a regional caucus of representatives on both sides of the aisle to deal with this, but not just to say, okay, well, we're a caucus, and because they do have caucuses for many things or whatever, but to actually sit there with and involve the experts, the scientists that are engaged in the work that needs to be done, and have them advise instead of letting corporations get in and kind of chip away at all of the things that we're trying to do, because that's why we are where we are now, because they're always allowed to push and change the things that we're going to focus on. I think everyone in this room is smart enough to know what we need to do, how we need to do it, for the most part, maybe not the intricacies of all the engineering that's involved, but we aren't getting there because of what? Is it because there aren't enough environmental groups in Michigan, in the country? No, there are. There are plenty of people that care about the environment. Yes, we all do. Why is it that it's not getting done? Corporations, wealth, greed, getting that last bit of money for a dividend for somebody. And in the 7th Congressional District, we have power companies that we do need to put more pressure on. We do need to force them to do more, faster. And this idea that they can, they manipulate the game and they talk a good game. Trust me, I saw them in Jackson speaking. They talk a good game about what it is that they're doing. But they know that they could be doing much more. But they don't do much more because of the way that they get their funding, the way that they get these sweet deals to enter cities and create all of these programs and projects and things. But a lot of those projects are based on technology and fuel usage that we don't want, fossil fuels that we don't want to be using. So I think it really does take leadership again. You need the kind of leadership that's going to stand up and say, hey, this may cost me an election, but this movement isn't going to let it go away. There will be somebody to replace me, and they're going to say the same thing, and this is how we're going to fight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congress is a microcosm of what's going on in the United States today. It represents all the diverse backgrounds, not quite all the diverse ethnicities, and not quite enough of women. But just as we asked a question about diplomacy with military operations, what do you bring to the table? What can you offer as a way of moving things forward in Congress, even if there's not a majority of Democrats? How is your approach to the world one that can help bring resolution to the things that we've talked about?
You're the treasurer, right? So I can disagree with you. Can't disagree with the chair. Unfortunately, I disagree with you completely about what Congress is made of and what it represents. And I understand, I think I understand what you mean, but I think the first thing we need to do is really recognize what is Congress made of. Who are the people that are there? Who are the people that win the election? What do they represent? What are they fighting for? What are they standing for? And when you do that, you can see that they're way over on one side of the spectrum. And then all of the working class people and the poor people and all of that, they're way over here. And that's why we don't get the representation that we want. Again, our government has been commandeered. It's been taken from us. And it takes the people from the grassroots up to take it back. That's what my candidacy represents. That's what the movement I'm a part of represents. It's for the people to rise up and take the power back, to make the changes we know need to happen. It's not going to happen. And one of the things I'm really struggling with right now is that I really truly believe that while we are all here talking about the Trump administration and the leadership style that we see brewing up all around the world or whatever, is that you need to understand the way that this works is people who have privilege are the first to step over on the side of that kind of government because they don't want to lose what they have. And that means people in this room might be moved to do so. We can all sit here and say we wouldn't, but if we start losing our freedoms, the middle class, upper middle class, and the wealthy people are not going to go inside with the poor and working class people who are going to be oppressed by the regimes that are taking over the world. And I know it's really bleak and I know it's very depressing, but that's what I struggle with every day. When I watch Democracy Now!, I watch 15 minutes of news a day because that's all I can stomach. That's what I see, and that's what crushes me, and that's what's moving me so passionately to implore everyone. I told my wife this, it isn't losing the election that is going to make me sad if I lose the primary or if I lose the general. What's going to make me sad is that the people didn't believe in the people to make the changes that we needed, and that's the thing that really, really scares me. Thank you.
I like what Steve said. And I guess what I would just add to that is 20 of the 24 years of public service, I wasn't a partisan elected official because that's my charter. My values are very strong Democrat, but my charter of the city said you're not partisan. Like, you don't serve as a partisan, you're not elected as a partisan. So I work with whoever wants to work in the community that we would be working in. So if I'm in DC and we have a bipartisan caucus, and I will tell you there are a lot of bipartisan groups in DC that are working on things, but you never hear about them because it's not, you know, this angry, sexy talk about, ooh, you know, whatever Trump's latest thing is, right? But there are people, there are good public servants that are trying to do the right thing, but they're not getting a voice. And that part of this is media. Like, I think we have a huge, huge problem with how our citizens are informed. I'm very concerned about that. When I go door to door and talk to people, people are not getting the whole story. In a lot of areas, I think that is, besides campaign finance reform, that's one of the biggest issues. I think, how are we gonna help inform people? So I kind of feel like if I get elected, what my number one job would be is to get, you know, be on the ground here and continue to help people understand that the role of government, you know, how important it is. And to what Steve's point is that we do have a challenge with our working people because they continue to vote for Republicans. I can't even tell you. I've been doing this since 2012, trying to get more people to vote for Democrats because Democrats represent them. And I can't tell you what. I talked to people at the doors, and they were like, well, I'm going to vote for Romney. Or I'm like, why? You know, because they're businessmen. I mean, these like really stupid answers. I mean, no offense to the people that, but it's like, they're not helping you. Romney could care less, you know. I mean, and it's still like that. Like, we're talking to people that are Trump supporters that will vote for me because they think DC's broken, and it is broken, but they still think Trump's working for them. Why do they think that? So I'm working together, working across the aisle, meeting people where they are and trying to help learn together. That's what I'm all about.